Hello and welcome to what I believe to be about part 9 in our history of evolution as written by Mr. Kent Hovind. The next individual on our journey through the history of evolution is Ernest Haeckel. He was born in 1834 and died in 1919. He was a German biologist and philosopher. He developed the biogenetic law, or the recapitulation theory. This theory teaches that the human embryo inside the mother's womb goes through different stages of evolution, from fish to reptile to mammal to human. This has long since been disproven. It is now known that there is no recapitulation. This theory is used for the justification of abortion. The human embryo, the abortionists say, is not fully human yet, and it's okay to kill it because it hasn't yet reached the human stage. I'm not saying that abortion started with evolution. I am saying that evolution does serve to give, in the abortionist mind, some scientific justification to abortion. Haeckel was an advocate of Lamarck's theory that acquired characteristics could be inherited. He invented all sorts of sketches or fabricated pictures that showed the different embryos of animals, including man, and how they were so similar. He later confessed that these were lies. These sketches were reproduced and are still displayed in some textbooks. Haeckel became one of Germany's ideologists for racism, nationalism, and imperialism. Probably more than any other man, Haeckel is responsible for the influence on a young man who is to come later and radically change the world, Adolf Hitler. In reading Haeckel's ideas and experiments, Hitler decided that the strongest race was the one that was to survive. His imperialism led to his belief that the Germans were to take over the world. Much harm has come to the world by this man, Ernest Haeckel. In the mid-1850s, there was a revival of the Buddhist cult. It was co-founded by Colonel H.S. Olcott. The goal of this was to unify the Buddhist. The name of this revival was Theosophy. The Theosophy cult was also founded by Madame Helena Blavatsky. The second statement in their platform of doctrinal belief says, "The universe was evolved, not created, and it functions according to law." We are seeing a great revival of the New Age cult today. Sigmund Freud is the next man in the great influence for evolution and against biblical Christianity. He was born in 1856 and died in 1939. He was an ardent follower of Darwin. In 1915, he was convinced that Darwin's and Lamarck's theories were right. He believed that acquired traits could be inherited. He thought that mental disorders were simply leftover behaviors that had been appropriate in early stages of evolution. He has also believed in the recapitulation theory. Freud is known as the father of modern psychology. Many of the teachings and practices of psychology today are based on Freud's observations that man is just an animal and needs to be treated as an animal. The next man we come to is Sir Julian Huxley. He was born in 1887 and died in 1975. He was the first director of the UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. He was also one of the founders of the American Humanist Association in 1933. He was a pantheist and believed that nature is the God that is to be worshipped. He is quoted as saying, "Darwin's theory is no longer a theory, but a fact." He is also quoted as saying, "No supernatural designer is needed." He believed that evolution could answer all of the problems. He was the leader of the New Age movement until his death in 1975. He is reported by his nurse that on his deathbed, as he looked up to heaven with a blank stare, he said, "So it is true." His brother, Aldous Huxley, born in 1894 and died in 1963, was a leader in the modern drug culture. He was an atheist, a philosopher, and a strong advocate of hallucinogenic drugs. Huxley is largely responsible for the drug culture that developed in the 60s. He was one of the first intellectuals to openly promote taking drugs as a way to expand your mind and your experience. There are a number of people on the list in this 20th century who have had an influence for evolution and against God. Henry Fairfield Osborn, an American anthropologist, was a leading evolutionist and an avid racist. During the first half of this century, he was the director of the American Museum of Natural History. He believed that the various stages of childhood for a Caucasian were said to represent the lower races and how high they had attained in evolution. For instance, He said that the blacks are at the bottom, then the yellow races, then the white are at the top. Let me quote from Osborne's book, The Evolution of Human Races, Natural History Magazine, January-February 1925, page 129. The Negroid stock is even more ancient than the Caucasian and Mongolian, and may be proved by their examination not only of the brain, of the hair, of the bodily characters such as the teeth, the genitalia, the sense organs, but of the instincts, the intelligence. The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapien. Evolution has brought the world so much trouble. This is one of the key tools that Satan is using here in the end times to bring the world under his domination. Shintoism is the state religion of Japan. It is a mixture of Buddhism and ancient polytheistic myths about Japanese people. Shintoism teaches that the Japanese are descendants of the gods and are destined to rule the world. They teach that the emperor is from the sun god, the highest god. It was Shintoism based on evolution that was responsible for Japan's actions in World War II. They were determined to take over and rule the world, just like Hitler was doing in Germany. Both of them were motivated by a desire to help evolution along. This goes right back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan said, quote, "Ye shall be as gods." From the very beginning, man has had a desire to take over the throne of God, and Satan promotes that desire by the teaching of evolution. Next in our series, Part 2, The Religion of Evolution.